Similar, we'll get to this. Have you ever wondered why in the world God would command all these sacrifices? Is God just God? Like blood and guts, or I mean, has that ever puzzled you? It puzzled me. What you're going to find is there will be something of a correlation, many scholars will point out, between what is commanded to be sacrificed and what's worshipped in Egypt. In other words, what you're going to find is that Israel will leave physically from Egypt, but all of salvation history will be about removing Egypt from the heart of Israel. So when Israel falls back into idolatry, the prophets will say, "You've returned to Egypt, you've returned to Egypt, you've returned to Egypt," spiritually and metaphorically. So Israel will leave Egypt, but we got to get Egypt out of Israel. You see? So here's just an analogy. It might be a little extreme, but it's an analogy to get at the point. We're going to see that God, like a good father, who gives more rules and tightens up the freedoms when the son or daughter is wayward. In other words, when the son or daughter is mature, they make better decisions for themselves. Less, kind of overbearing rules and restrictions need to be in play. But the more rebelliousness occurs, the curfew's got to go down. You've got to, make sure you do this, and this. I want to see your homework before you, go out and play in the yard, etc., etc. Similarly, you'll see connections between when Israel falls and increased legislation, especially of the ceremonial and sacrificial. What's going on here? Well, suppose you have an alcoholic, for example, who recovers. They're rehabilitated. They have left Egypt. And suppose some biblically minded therapist says, "Well, do this now. Every morning and every night for the next 50 years, maybe the rest of your life, whatever, I want you to take a bottle of Jack Daniels, go to that kitchen sink, smash it, and pour it out. I want you to ritually renounce your old ways. Ritually renounce your old ways." Similarly, the sacrifices, you'll see them pick up big time. What's going on here? Okay, Israel, you used to be beholden and enslaved to all this idolatry. Now, to prove to you and to me, slay these animals. Not when you feel like it, but morning and night. Because if you think that this is a God, or you think this represents a God, you're not going to do it. So it's a ritual renunciation of the idolatrous past. That's what's going on with the heightened sacrificial laws. And it similarly starts here with the plagues. A strategic strike against polytheism. Take a look at, I'll just give you the verse. Exodus 12:12, basically referring to all the plagues. He'll repeat this in Numbers 33. He says, "I have executed judgment on the gods of Egypt." Similar, take a look at Exodus 8:26. Chapter 8, verse 26. This is where another time where Moses goes to Pharaoh and says, "Let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness so that we can offer a sacrifice." Pharaoh says, "Do it right here." Moses says, "We can't." Chapter 8, verse 26. But Moses said, "It would not be right to do so, for we shall sacrifice to the Lord our God offerings abominable to the Egyptians. If we sacrifice offerings abominable to the Egyptians before their eyes, will they not stone us? We must go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God." In other words, they're going to be called to sacrifice that which they've been worshiping around what people worship in Egypt. So again, think of the sacrifices. You might think of it with two prongs. On the one hand, they do prefigure the ultimate sacrifice of Christ on the cross. But there's also a proximate motivation, and that's this: to rid Israel of their idolatry. To rid Israel of their idolatry. Okay, that's so. Jot down 8:26. Should you have that in notes? Exodus 8:26. Note the correlation between sacrifice and Egyptian idolatry. Okay, let's move to Exodus 19, verse 8. What you have there, let's go to the Passover first. Let's go to the Passover. Let's go to the Passover in Exodus 12. Okay. All right. What happens in the Passover?
Like the angel of death or whatever, death goes into each house and kills the first son of everybody who doesn't.
Yeah, and then right. Okay, so the Israelites call it to slay a lamb, sacrifice the lamb, spray the blood or sprinkle the blood on the doorpost. Now, this may have been an extremely provocative thing to do. In other words, we can debate about which cattle and livestock were correlated with which god, but it's likely, and many would posit that suppose this didn't come to pass, every Israelite home would have been a marked home to be, as was said, stone. They would have taken a lot of guts to do that. They had to also eat the lamb. And those who did this, as Alex said, death would pass over the home. Those who didn't, the firstborn son would be slain. Zach?
What does it say? Blood post?
Oh, spray. Blood post. Sorry. Doorpost with blood.
There we go.
Excuse me there. Now we'll come back to the Passover because you'll also read things about use a hyssop branch to spray the doorpost. A lamb that is without blemish, a lamb that has no broken bones. That's verse 1246. When you turn to John's Gospel, John 19, he's going to make a point to say, it was a hyssop branch raised to Jesus when he took that last drink. That John would say, not a bone of his was broken. If you recall, the guards come and they see if he's dead, and they say, oh, he's already dead, and they pierce his side. Without blemish, the sinless lamb on the cross. In other words, John will go out of his way, as will the other gospel writers, to show you that Jesus is the new Lamb of God. This is the new Exodus, the new Passover, so that not simply an earthly death will pass over, but an eternal death will pass over those who are covered with the blood of the new Lamb. And you don't have to get all this now, but this is how. It's not just the early Christians, but the New Testament writers read the Bible. They look back at these realities, these often maybe an earthly salvation, prefigured, typified, shadowed in their own way what Christ will do in the new. And every time what you see is that the earthly type, or the prefiguration in the Old Testament, prefigures a greater reality to come in the new. So to really apprehend the greatness of the new reality, you've got to kind of first grapple with
the old reality.